We're going to learn this story in English from the Talmud from Tractate Brachot for Parsha SHOFTIM. We'll just hopefully be able to get through the story, and then we'll talk a little bit about Rav Kook's commentary to the story. In Parsha SHOFTIM, we read about the mitzvah of making a king or coronating a king for the Jewish people. There is so much to discuss about systems of government. Winston Churchill once said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the other forms of government. Meaning that there's a lot to be said about the deficiencies of a democracy, because a democracy means that every citizen of the state gets a vote, gets an equal vote. And that means that no matter how well educated or how intelligent my neighbor is, his voice counts just as much as mine. It doesn't matter how bigoted or how racist or how hateful that person is, their voice counts just as much as mine. I may have spent an entire lifetime refining my character so that I have better discretion than other people do. Or he or she may have better discretion than I, and yet I have an equal voice as much as they. That's the deficiency of democracy, you understand. Which is why in the ancient world, democracy in many city-states, in many countries, was frowned upon. Plato hated democracy. He felt it was a terrible form of government because you're suggesting that both the enlightened and the unenlightened have an equal voice. Well, how's that going to work? You're going to end up with the lowest common denominator in office. And lo and behold, sometimes it seems that that's exactly what we've achieved, right? Yeah.
There's also a phrase, the tyranny of the democracy.
The tyranny of the democracy.
When, for example, in Germany, Hitler came to power through a democratic vote.
Democratic vote. Gaza is democratically elected Hamas, right? Absolutely. Okay, so there's certainly benefits to a monarchy, but of course monarchies have pitfalls as well. And of course the greatest pitfall of a monarchy is when you have when you have a dynasty, and the person who comes to be the new monarch is just a deplorable person. And that doesn't end up well for anybody, right? Because that's the only voice that can make decisions. So that's why, Plato talks about the philosopher king, which is that the king that is chosen optimally has to be an enlightened individual who will be able to lead with wisdom and jurisprudence and compassion and so forth. That's the best form of government. But it's in an ideal world, and that's why we talk about our prayers for the coming of the Messiah, because the Messiah, the Mashiach, is a king who is not a corrupt king, but rather the ultimate enlightened human being. That is the ultimate and most perfect form of government that we can aspire towards. And that is why the Torah talks about having a monarchy. A monarchy is something that is desirable at certain points in Jewish history. But now let's take a look at a story. Rabbi Yochanan said, one should always strive to run toward kings of Israel to greet them. And not only should he run toward kings of Israel, but also toward kings of the nations of the world, so that if he will be privileged to witness the glory of the Mashiach and the world to come, he will distinguish between the kings of Israel and the kings of the nations of the world. The Gemara relates that Rav Sheshet was blind. Everyone was going to greet the king. Apparently there was some kind of parade going through town where the king and his entourage were coming to town. So everyone went out to greet the king, and Rav Sheshet stood up and went along with them. A certain heretic found him there and said to him, the intact jugs go to the river. Where do the broken jugs go? Meaning, what was he saying to him? Why is a blind person going to see the king? You can't see anything. What's the point of you going? Rav Sheshet said to him, come and see that I know more than you do. The first troop passed, first sort of group of the entourage of the king, like in a parade, you have all of the different groups that come by. And when the noise grew louder, the heretic said to him, "Oh, the king is coming." Rav Sheshet said to him, "The king is not coming." The second troop passed, and when the noise grew louder, the heretic said to him, "Now the king is coming." And Rav Sheshet said to him, "The king is not coming." The third troop passed, and when there was silence, Rav Sheshet said to him, "Certainly now the king is coming." The heretic said to him, "How do you know this?" Rav Sheshet said to him, "Royalty on earth is like royalty in the heavens. As it is written with regard to Hashem's revelation to Eliyahu Hanavi on Mount Chorev, that God said to him, 'Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord,' and behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind, and then after the wind an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire a still small voice. And it was so, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave." God's revelation was specifically at the moment of silence. When the king came, Rav Sheshet began to bless him. The heretic mockingly said to him, "Do you bless someone you do not see?" The Gemara asks him what ultimately happened to this heretic. Some say that his friends gouged out his eyes, and some say that Rav Sheshet fixed his gaze upon him and the heretic became a pile of bones. End of story. Okay, we don't have to worry about the sort of the retribution of the heretic. We know that he was, a lot of times, when you read whatever happened to this vile person, this obnoxious person who was just so cruel in everything he said to Rav Sheshet, I don't know necessarily that you have to take literally what the Gemara says that this really happened to him, but it's sort of like, yeah, that really should have happened to him, and we're happy if it did, because just a deplorable human being this was, right? But the point of the story is that sometimes you can infer and intuit things that are happening based on your understanding of Scripture. But as it particularly pertains to a king, I think there's a much deeper message that's going on over here. If you turn the page, take a look at a commentary from Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, who had a wonderful commentary to Masechet Brachot called Ein Ayah. We'll just read a few lines from it because that's all that time affords us. He quotes the story of the story of the blind Rav Sheshet and the heretic and the exchange they had about when the king was coming. And he writes as follows: Kol hatikunim sheba'olam heim la'olam toldot ha'hechrech. Anytime, you see, I'm sorry, I started on the fifth line. Sorry. He says, anytime remedies or rectifications come to the world, they come to the world as a result of necessity, which means that we find that alignments and corrections are made in the world all the time, but they come out of necessity. Kikein yasad Hashem yitbarach ba'olamo, shetihiyah haklipa kodemet lepri, ve'hahechrech shel hara yihiyeh hasiba le'orer levakesh et hatov u'lemotza'o. He says that's the way God constructed the world at the very beginning. He said, I want the shell to precede the fruit. You are always going to find something hard that will be covering over something sweet. And it takes time sometimes for the sweetness to emerge and to ripen. That's the way God created the world. You plant a seed, it rots, putrefies, and then something beautiful grows. That's the way the world works. Something negative comes as the precursor to the remedy to that precursor, which is usually the fruit to the correction and the good outcome. Al kain, sidrei hasibot habaot bechevra ha'enoshit ad shemotzim hechrech lesidur melucha. He says, so if we talk about what are the social conditions that are necessary in order for a group of people to elect a king or a ruler over themselves, usually it's out of turmoil, right? It's out of a sense of something's wrong. We need someone to lead us in order to make things right. That's the way social structures get established, right? Like if we live in a place and there's no one who's created garbage collection, we need to appoint someone who's going to be on the city council who's going to be in charge of garbage collection. If we have no roads, we've got to appoint someone on our city council who will be in charge of paving roads. That's how governments come into being, right? When we notice that something is amiss, we need to appoint political leaders in order to help fix the problem, okay? Hu batchila tavo b'chol kibbutz hitga'ashut pnimit riv umadon pratiyim. There may be some internal chaos or problem that a community or a society is facing. Umitoch heder hashalva bifnim hakibbutz yir'u hechrech lahem l'sader inyaneim hapnimiyim al yedei hakamat melucha v'shulton oz melech. And as a result of their inner turmoil or chaos or problem, they will say, well, we need this problem to get fixed, so let's get a king over ourselves. Im kein harash hu hahechrech liot kodem bo hamelech b'tur hora'al hasiba shel ha'amadat hamelucha. So all of the chaos, the noise, so to speak, that's made, is a symptom and the sort of the impetus to create a governmental ruler to help fix all of the chaos and the noise. You see where he's connecting to the Talmudic story about all of the fanfare and the noise that starts coming down the street? That's not the king. That's the precursor to the king. Because all of the chaos and the noise is what precipitates the appointment of a king. So it can't be that the king is in the noise. The king's not in the earthquake. The king's not in the wind. That's the thing that lets us know that we need a king. Ve'achar harash shekvar shakta al yedei hamelech hitga'ashut hapnimit v'ha'uma histadra b'tachsisei malchut. He says, after the king has been appointed and we've created internal peace and the king has succeeded in ordering and creating harmony within the kingdom, hinei tzricha lihitbatzer bekochoteha shelo yitkenu b'tchilat ha'itkaimut ha'lu'umit ki al yedei ha'hibanot mechurbanam shalamim acherim. Then the king has another task. He's got to make sure that we as a group, as a society, are well fortified so that we can resist an onslaught from other nations who seek our destruction. That's the second role of the king. First, it is to put to rest the internal strife and disorder. And then once he's succeeded in doing that, and we have a nice chevra, we got our kibbutz all set up, then we got to put a perimeter of security to make sure the Arabs don't attack us, right? That's the second part. Shebehechrech mitnagsim heim betur tsarim vo'ivim she'efshar lefi anohug lavo lidei hityasdut betucha kim al yedei eish hamilchama hochelet keitzim adam rav. And the only time that impetus arrives to create that fortification is when we start to feel an attack from outside. So that's perhaps the second troop of soldiers that are coming down the street that Rav Sheshet detects. That's not the king, that's the impetus for the king to act as a king. Ve'achar shekvar saru kol hamafri'im hachitzoniyim gam kein az tavo hamelucha lematkunta haru'uya la shehi hamenucha. He says only after the king has put to rest the internal strife, the external strife, then everything comes to peace. Ha'hanhaga ha'yeshara b'shevet mishor lichlal ha'am kula. And that allows the kingdom to live in harmony and peace. And that quiet, that everything is good, everything is peaceful, everything is calm, is how Rav Sheshet knew that the king was arriving. That's the deeper meaning of the story. And now Rav Kook then turns it to us and he says that that's on the macro level. That's when we look at things on a societal level, that's the function of a king, to put to rest the internal strife and the external strife. Now, what about myself as an individual? I have to make a king. I have to make myself a king. And how do I do that? I have to examine what is the internal strife, the internal conflicts that I have in my own life. And I have to learn how to create a monarchy within myself to be able to quell that internal strife of the conflicts that I have in my personality between my selfishness and my aspirations for good. And I have to be able to come to terms through an acceptance of the Torah, to use the Torah as my guide, as my moral compass, in order to be able to put to rest my internal strivings and the internal stirrings that are constantly in turmoil. And once I've accomplished that, then I can perhaps work on my interpersonal relationships and be able to put those to rest and create that sense of calm as well. And then only afterwards will I know that I have become the king has arrived. In other words, the function of the Torah is to allow me to put to rest all of the chaos and the turbulence that is in my life. But the objective is to reach that level of harmony and peace within myself, not to constantly be plagued by internal struggling and striving and internal conflict, but ultimately monarchy. When will I be a king or a ruler over myself? When I no longer face those internal struggles. And that's a goal that is truly a worthy goal for all of us to strive for, is to try and reach that point where there's just the kol demama daka, the still silent voice, that the ferocious wind and earthquakes of life no longer plague me. I'm able to come to terms with it. You know, a lot of that comes with age. Have you noticed that? The older we become,
Not really.
the more sometimes we're equipped to sort of let things go.
But is it
No.
possible at all to have this
Well,
inner calmness?
Yes, you're certainly more calm today than you were 30 years ago, but we're constantly working towards that elusive perfection, towards the arrival of our own personal kingship within ourselves. Yeah.
So the king, the Hebrew king comes with the Torah and brings Torah into battle even, like this?
Yeah.
So,
The Torah is the tool to achieve that still silent voice. And that's the goal. The goal is use the Torah as your moral compass, as the way that can guide your life towards a life of harmony, so that you don't no longer feel the conflicts, neither internally nor externally.